visual artist based in Dublin, and I work across various mediums and in a site-specific way. So I work in sound, written work, drawing, and then large-scale installation work, which would bring together audio, field recordings, and soundscapes and sculpture. I was born in Dublin, very close to the sea, and I suppose I have a persistent focus on the ocean and on water. In general, I think that proximity to that space where water meets the land has been a big influence on how I've approached my practice. I'm really interested in stories like Bob Quinn's Connemara, which traces our heritage in Ireland as a seafaring nation where traditionally, even in Connemara, people felt closer to America than they did to Dublin, just by virtue of this ocean space that they felt very safe in. That kind of history of ourselves as an island nation is a big part of my research, so that's been a big focus. Like this persistent interest in the ocean and water, and I think that really has been part of my life for so long that that's how I grew to understand the world, or as sort of a way to apply kind of thinking towards my practice. So I would see kind of sustainability and ecological kind of framing as a very much a hybrid way of thinking, like a way that you need to be able to view things through different frames or different perspectives. Donna Haraway has a lovely quote that we inherited a bad geometry from the past, and I think that's something that really resonates with me, and working in the space of sustainability and ecological kind of research allows you reframe things and act in a hybrid way and create a new kind of geometry for moving forward or for rethinking things. So yeah, so it's been there all along, and I think now, because like, as I said, the umbrella of the environment is kind of tipping into every discourse, that's a really powerful language now to work through or work with. Studio setup is usually piles of articles that are half read, earmarked books that have to be revisited, particularly post-COVID. But I really need the language of philosophy and other scientific kind of thinking to kind of draw me into a subject. So it starts with that and then moves on to notebook work, drawing, canvas work, and then experimenting with materials. So the studio is a desk space and a making space, but then because I work site specifically, a lot of the time the making will happen off-site, or will be audio or field recordings that have to happen in situ. So it's a balance between being on-site and in the studio. A lot of the time, drawing really helps me to tease an idea out. So sitting down and making marks, or just spending time in that space where you're losing yourself just in mark making or idea generation without even knowing. And it usually starts there, and then we'll move into a research phase. And that's kind of the process. And then stories and narratives are a huge part of that, like dipping into obscure stories or research that maybe is very hybrid or jumps from one topic to another. The tangential links between those are really kind of what inspires me in the end. Site-specific work, or at least being in spaces interacting with the more than human world, is a huge inspiration for how I work. The nervous system beyond our own nervous system, whether it's a seaweed or a raven or a corvid, those are spaces for discovery as far as even framing who we are as a species. You know, theorists like Anna Zing, Donna Haraway, Braiding Sweetgrass I'm reading at the moment, which is a beautiful book. Poets like Etel Andan and literary works come into it as well. So whether it's from evolutionary biology, I'm reading a great book on the aquatic ape, which positions evolutionary development of the human species in the intertidal zone. All of that thinking is really like where I kind of go to for inspiration. I want to work with materials that have a low environmental impact to start off with. So typically I'm going into a site and or a space or a research space and looking for materials that I can work with myself. So I would do the fabrication, if there is any, in the studio myself, actually using bones at the moment, like a cephalopod bone, calcium that they use to clean the beaks of birds, and I'm using that to create casts at the moment. That material comes from direct research on cephalopods I'm doing at the moment. So the material normally comes from the story. We need to kind of build new worlds in this ecological space we're in right now, or in this time of the Anthropocene. So I was working with scientists in CIMAR, a marine institution in Porto, And they were stress testing sea urchins to see how quickly they would adapt to rising temperatures and sea level. So they were giving me the figures on seawater acidification and how it's destroying a huge number of shellfish and crustaceans, and this is really the future of the ocean currently. So I'm interested in sound as a medium for exploring this, so I set up my own experiments and tried to record the sound of dissolving shell, and set up my own kind of mesocosms, they're called, and actually with a very good quality hydrophone was able to pick up this dissolving noise. And it struck me that this must be such a strange sound if you hear it en masse in the ocean, and it's something that we're not attuned to because we're working so much in the ocular. So I created a sound piece for the scientists that brought this sound together, but also with their voices that I'd recorded and distorted as it was going on, and myself and Colm, who I work on music projects with, and my partner, played this back to them with this resonance of this dissolving sound. One of the scientists came up to me afterwards, because I did it in the science lab to the whole kind of cohort, and he said that he was deeply moved and he'd never put emotion to his data before. And I think it really shows the power of visual arts, the way, you know, working in a hybrid manner like artists do can mend and repair and actually attune people to something that they deeply need to be attuned to in this time. So that's maybe a nice kind of way to talk about a work that I think nods to the power of hybrid thinking in the arts and what it can achieve. Because I would look to the more than human world as a point of inspiration for working, a lot of that, what that attunes you to, is the sensory world that we don't and we're not aware of. So that's a real point of inspiration. So I think using in sound and using site-specific work can really be important as a way to bring people back into that kind of space of understanding the sensory world outside of just our own kind of nervous system. And then moving people out of their comfort zone into a site is another really important kind of part of how I would work. Again, I was lucky that I had a sort of DIY house, which meant that making and doing was something I did all the time. That's a huge way, I suppose, of learning. My mum used to call it like an emotional intelligence rather than an academic intelligence. My school wasn't particularly art focused, which was probably a disadvantage. I think things have changed a lot now, but the junior cert was great because you could just take your own project and run with it. And then as it became more structured to leaving cert, I think I became a bit, like I was definitely probably someone who should have been researching conceptual artists at that time, but it wasn't part of the curriculum whatsoever. Post-school, I did a portfolio course, and then in the end went and studied philosophy. And because I had a philosophy and sociology background, ecological questions were there already, and social justice and environmental justice were really part of what I did. Then I went back to do an MA, which really focused me in thinking how I would use my art practice to kind of communicate those stories or draw those narratives together. I think my persistent goal was that we needed to question everything. That was like probably why I ended up studying philosophy and sociology. And then when you look at the places you can ask those questions in a really pertinent way and get the public engaged with them, the space of visual arts is like a really powerful place to do it. It focuses on mending and repairing, but it doesn't have to be pigeonholed. You can cross disciplines and engage. For me, it's one of the most powerful spaces right now to allow you world build, like create new stories for these difficult times.